she shielded giant Viking from arrow. Next day, she woke in his bed with ring on finger. The morning fog clung to the trees like a silver veil, and shafts of sunlight pierced through in thin, golden lines. She had always preferred the forest to the noise of villages or towns. Here, she felt free. Here, she felt alive. But today, the quiet had been broken. The sound of distant shouting carried on the wind, followed by the clang of metal and the thud of hooves. Ilara stiffened. Her sharp eyes scanned the clearing ahead, and she caught sight of a battle erupting between two groups of warriors. Swords clashed and arrows flew like deadly rain. She froze for a moment, weighing her options. Normally, she would have stayed hidden, but something deep inside her stirred, a strange pull as if fate itself had woven her path into this chaos. Then she saw him. A giant among men, taller and broader than any warrior she had ever seen. His long, dark hair was tangled with blood and sweat, his blue eyes sharp and alert despite the pain etched across his face. He wore heavy armor that gleamed even under the gray sky, and a massive sword hung at his side. One of the enemy's arrows had pierced his shoulder, and he stumbled, fighting to stay on his feet. Without thinking, Ilara ran. She could feel the cold metal of the arrow, the sharpness of it even from a distance. Her heart pounded, not with fear but with a fierce determination. She reached him just in time. He tried to move, to dodge, but another arrow whistled through the air, heading straight for him. Without hesitating, Ilara flung herself forward, pushing him down. The arrow struck her shoulder instead, pain flashing through her like fire. She gritted her teeth but didn't cry out. Who are you?" the giant gasped, his voice deep and rough but tinged with disbelief. "Just someone who doesn't like seeing people die," Ilara said, biting back the pain. Her hands pressed against the arrow, trying to keep herself steady. "Get up or stay down, it doesn't matter. Just survive." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment the sounds of battle faded. It was just the two of them, her, bruised and bleeding, and him, enormous and powerful, yet vulnerable. There was a strange electricity in that silence, a recognition that went deeper than words. Rurik, or that's the name she would later learn, moved slowly, grunting with effort, and finally stood. He towered over her, yet there was a softness in his gaze, a quiet gratitude. He wanted to say something, but his lips pressed into a thin line. "Ilara," she murmured, almost to herself. The name felt right, like it belonged to her. He blinked. "How do you know my name?" he asked, voice low, cautious. She shook her head. "I don't, it felt right." Before either could speak further, the battle pressed closer. Ilara realized that hiding was no longer an option. She took a deep breath, pulling a dagger from her belt, and stood beside him. "We fight together, or we don't fight at all." Rurik's eyes narrowed. He didn't speak, only nodded once, acknowledging her courage and choice. Together they turned to face the enemy. The clash of steel was deafening. Arrows flew in tight volleys, swords swung in deadly arcs, and Ilara moved with skill she didn't know she had. She ducked, rolled, and struck with precision, each movement instinctive. But it wasn't just skill, it was determination, a will to protect the giant beside her, even if it cost her life. Rurik fought like a force of nature. Each swing of his sword was heavy and precise, cutting down the enemy with terrifying efficiency. Yet he relied on her presence as much as she relied on him. They moved almost in rhythm, instinctively aware of each other's strength and weaknesses. When the battle finally subsided, the forest was silent except for the heavy breathing of survivors. The enemy had fled, leaving a trail of broken armor and scattered weapons. Ilara leaned against a tree, chest heaving, her shoulder bleeding but not enough to stop her. Rurik stood beside her, his towering frame still tense. He looked down at her, and for the first time the mask of the giant warrior slipped. His eyes softened, and he reached out a hand. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was warm and steady, anchoring her in a moment of shared victory and relief. "You saved my life," he said finally, voice low and reverent. I couldn't let you die, she replied, shrugging as best she could through the pain. Someone had to protect the giant. He chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to echo through the trees. Giant, he repeated, almost teasing. You think so little of yourself, little shield. Alara narrowed her eyes. Little, I'm far from little, she smiled despite the blood and sweat on her face. And you owe me your life, don't forget it. He raised an eyebrow, a silent acknowledgement, and then looked away, scanning the horizon. You shouldn't stay here, he said finally. The forest, it's not safe anymore, not for anyone. I know, she said softly. Her mind already turned to the path ahead, the dangers still lurking in shadows. I'll leave soon. But fate had other plans. That night, Alara didn't return to her small cabin in the woods. She woke to a warmth she didn't recognize, the scent of wood smoke and strong herbs in the air. Her body was heavy, her muscles stiff, but strangely unhurt. Sunlight filtered through a small window, painting golden patterns across the floor. Her hand twitched. Something cold and hard pressed against her finger. She froze, staring down in disbelief. A golden ring glinted in the sunlight, delicate yet commanding. She had no memory of putting it on. Panic fluttered in her chest, mingled with a curious thrill. Before she could think further, the door opened. There he stood, Rurik, tall, powerful, and impossibly calm. His eyes met hers, and in that gaze was a mixture of pride, something unspoken, and a question she didn't yet understand. You're awake, he said simply. Where am I? Alara stammered, her fingers tightening around the ring. You're here with me, he replied. His voice carried authority, but there was no harshness in it, only certainty like a tide she couldn't resist. Alara's heart raced. Confusion, fear, and something unnameable swirled inside her. I don't understand. How did I? Rurik took a step closer, his shadow falling over her. The ring chooses, he said, his voice quiet yet powerful. It has chosen you. Fate has woven our paths together. You protected me, and now, his gaze softened, and for the first time he looked vulnerable. Now we cannot walk apart. Alara swallowed hard, the forest, the battle, the arrow, and the giant all rushing back in her mind. She wanted to speak, to protest, but her voice caught in her throat. The warmth of his presence, the weight of the ring, and the invisible tether she felt between them left her rooted in place. Fate, she whispered, almost to herself. Yes, he said, stepping back but keeping his gaze locked on her. And it is only beginning. You may not understand it yet, but this is the first choice, and the first step on a path you cannot turn from. Her mind spun with questions, doubts, and a strange, thrilling anticipation. She had always lived alone, guided only by her skill and instinct. But something about this giant warrior, this forest, this mysterious ring, made her feel like she was part of something greater. Something powerful, something dangerous. And yet, deep inside, a spark of longing flickered, a desire she had never known. For the first time, she realized that protecting someone else could be just as consuming as protecting herself. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Alara rose to her feet, the golden ring gleaming on her finger. She didn't know what lay ahead or if she was ready for it. But one thing was certain: the life she had known, quiet and solitary, had ended. And the life that awaited her, with him, promised fire, shadow, and a fate bound together that neither could escape. Her pulse quickened. The adventure, the danger, the impossible bond, and the stirrings of something deeper awaited. And somewhere in the distant mountains, the wind carried whispers of challenges yet to come, testing courage, loyalty, and the hearts of those brave enough to follow destiny. Alara took a deep breath. She was no longer just a hunter in the forest. She was part of a story larger than herself. And the giant beside her was only the beginning. The morning sun spilled through the tall windows of the fortress, painting the stone walls in warm gold. Alara sat on the edge of a wooden bench, staring at the golden ring on her finger. Its surface glimmered, catching the light like it held a secret of its own. She turned it slowly, unsure of how it had come to be there or what it meant. Rurik's presence filled the room, quiet and commanding. He leaned against the doorway, his broad frame silhouetted against the light, arms crossed. His eyes, pale and piercing, rested on her with a mixture of curiosity and something deeper, almost protective. "You can take it off," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. "If you want, it will not hold you against your will." Alara's fingers tightened around the ring. I don't know if I can," she admitted. "I don't even know what it is." "It is more than a ring," Rurik said, stepping closer. "It is a bond old as the mountains and rivers. It chooses only those who have strength, courage, and a heart that does not fear the unknown." Alara swallowed. Her pulse raced as she considered his words. Strength and courage she had, yes, but the heart that did not fear the unknown. She had always been careful, guarding herself, living alone, and yet somehow she had risked her life for him without hesitation. "Why me?" she whispered, looking up at him. "Why this bond?" Rurik's eyes softened, and for a brief moment the weight of his armor and warrior's mask seemed to vanish. He knelt slightly, just enough to meet her gaze. "Because you saved me," he said simply, "and because the bond chooses what the heart already knows. Fate brought you to me, Alara, whether you believe it or not." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. His words, quiet but full of certainty, made her feel both exposed and safe at the same time. She had always trusted her instincts, but this was something different. This was something she couldn't fully understand. Before she could respond, a loud horn echoed through the fortress. The sound vibrated through the stone walls, a warning and a call to arms. Rurik stiffened, the calm expression gone, replaced by the steel of a commander preparing for battle. "They come," he said, his voice low and serious. "The curse is stirring." Alara frowned. "Curse?" Rurik's eyes darkened. "A shadow follows my bloodline. My father angered the gods long ago. Our clan is strong, feared by many, but it is also cursed. We are bound to protect the lands and the people, but at a cost. The curse awakens whenever our strength is threatened, or when those who are not meant to bind themselves to us approach too closely." Alara's breath caught. She had always believed in spirits and old magic in the forest, but curses of this scale, it was terrifying to think about. Yet, the thought of facing it alongside Rurik, the giant warrior whose life she had once saved, stirred a strange determination inside her. "What do I have to do?" she asked, her voice steady. Rurik studied her, his piercing gaze measuring her resolve. "Survive and trust the bond. The ring will guide you, but more than that, you must trust yourself. The curse will test you. It will try to twist your heart to play on your fears, and it will test me as well." Alara nodded. Her hand brushed against the ring, and a warmth spread through her fingers as if it were alive. "Then I will trust it," she said, though her heart beat with both fear and excitement. The rest of the day was filled with preparation. Rurik showed her the fortress. The halls carved into the mountains, the armories lined with ancient weapons, and the rooms filled with relics that whispered of centuries past. Everywhere they went, Alara felt the pull of the ring, a quiet reminder that she was no longer alone in the world. By evening, they stood atop the fortress walls, looking out over the lands that stretched beyond the mountains. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson. The forests below were quiet, but the wind carried an uneasy whisper. "You feel it too, don't you?" Rurik asked, his voice barely above the wind. Alara nodded. "Yes, something is coming, something dark." He turned to her, the firelight catching in his hair. "The curse has been dormant for years, but your arrival, it has awakened it, and now it seeks to challenge both of us. The bond between us is not just a promise, it is protection, but protection comes at a cost." Alara felt a lump in her throat. She had faced danger before, yet never like this, never with the weight of destiny pressing down on her shoulders. And yet, standing beside Rurik, she felt a strange courage she had never known. She would face whatever came because running was no longer an option. Night fell and the fortress was cloaked in shadows. The torches flickered, casting long, dancing shapes on the walls. Alara sat near the fire, the ring warm against her skin, and tried to understand her place in this new world. Rurik joined her silently, sitting close enough that their shoulders brushed. She felt a jolt at the contact, her heartbeat quickening. He didn't speak at first, only letting the silence stretch between them, heavy with meaning. Finally, he said, "You are stronger than you realize. The bond sensed it, and so did I. You saved my life, not just with your body, but with your courage. That is rare." Alara looked at him, her eyes wide. I couldn't let you die. It was instinct." He smiled faintly, a rare and fleeting expression that made her stomach flutter. "Instinct or not, it is part of you, and it is part of what binds us now. The ring, it is not a prison. It is a guide, but it will demand trust, courage, and honesty. Are you ready for that?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I think I am. I want to understand it. I want to understand you." Rurik's gaze softened further. "And I you. But know this, the curse does not forgive weakness. It will test us in ways we cannot yet imagine, and it will not relent until it finds the strength in both of us." The night deepened, and the fortress grew quiet except for the crackling fire. Alara leaned back, staring at the ceiling, thoughts swirling. She had saved a giant warrior's life, and now somehow she was tied to him by a ring, a curse, and fate itself. The enormity of it all was dizzying but thrilling. Hours later, she awoke to a strange noise, a low, echoing wail that seemed to come from the mountains beyond the fortress. Her pulse quickened. The wind carried the sound, twisting it into words she could not understand. Rurik was already awake, standing near the window, watching the horizon. His jaw was set, his muscles tense. The faint glow of the moon illuminated his strong features, making him appear both human and larger than life. "It begins," he said softly. "The curse is awake. And it is testing us." Alara felt a shiver run through her. The ring pulsed on her finger, warm and almost alive. She understood now that leaving was no longer possible. The bond had chosen her, and the path ahead demanded courage, trust, and perhaps love she had never expected. "Then we face it together," she said, her voice firm despite the fear that gnawed at her. Rurik turned, his eyes locking with hers, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. No curse, no mountains, no forests, just a giant and the woman who had dared to protect him, now tethered to his fate. "You have no idea what you are stepping into," he said quietly. "But I will not let you face it alone. You are mine in a way that cannot be broken. And perhaps one day that will not frighten you." Alara swallowed hard, the heat rising in her chest. She did not know what the future held or if she would survive the challenges ahead. But one thing was clear, the bond had chosen them both and nothing could undo it. And as the howl of the curse echoed through the mountains, Alara felt an undeniable truth settle in her heart. Their fates were entwined now, in a story of shadows, fire, and destiny. And the first test was only just beginning. The mountains beyond the fortress were cloaked in mist, gray and cold, yet alive with the whispers of something ancient. Alara stood at the edge of the fortress walls, the golden ring on her finger pulsing softly. Her heart beat faster than ever before, a mixture of fear, determination, and a strange thrill. Rurik appeared beside her, his massive frame casting a shadow over the stones. He did not speak at first, only looked out into the mist-shrouded peaks. The wind tugged at his hair and cloak, carrying the faint, eerie cries of the curse that had awakened days before. "It waits for us," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "The curse will not relent until it tests us completely." Alara nodded, her hands trembling slightly. She had faced danger before, but this was different. The curse was no ordinary enemy. It was a force that sought to exploit fear, doubt, and weakness. And yet, she did not feel alone. The ring bound her to Rurik, and something in the giant's steady presence gave her courage. "Then we face it together," she said, gripping the edge of the wall. "I won't run, not now, not ever." Rurik's eyes softened, and for a brief moment he allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Good," he said, "because there is no turning back. Once we step into the mountains, the curse will begin its trial. Every choice, every action will matter." They began their ascent at dawn, climbing paths carved by time and wind. The forest below grew distant, replaced by jagged rocks and cold air that bit at their skin. Alara moved carefully, but her confidence grew with each step. She knew that Rurik's strength was unmatched, yet she was not weak. She had her own skills, her own courage. The bond, she realized, gave her more than protection, it gave her purpose. Hours passed. The howl of the wind and the cries of unseen creatures echoed through the peaks. Shadows seemed to twist and stretch, and the air itself felt alive, pressing against their senses. Alara felt the ring warm on her finger, as if reminding her that she was part of something larger. Suddenly, a shadow rose before them, a dark shape that moved like smoke, yet solid, like a figure made of mist and anger. The curse had taken form. Its eyes glowed faintly, and its voice, echoing like 1,000 whispers, filled the air. "You dare approach," the voice hissed. "You who carry the bond, you who think yourselves worthy." Alara felt a chill, but she did not step back. She gripped her dagger tightly, standing beside Rurik. "We are not afraid," she said. Rurik raised his sword, the steel glinting in the pale light. "Then face us, Shadow," he said, his deep voice firm and commanding. "We are bound. You cannot break us." The shadow surged forward, and the battle began. Not a battle of swords alone, but of wills. The curse struck at their minds, showing visions of fear and loss. It tried to separate them, whispering lies into Alara's ear. "He does not need you, leave now, you will die if you stay." Alara shook her head, fighting against the words. She glanced at Rurik, whose own eyes reflected the struggle. The curse could test him, could twist his power into something dark, but the bond between them was stronger. They were not alone. With a sudden surge of determination, she stepped forward, the ring glowing brightly. "I am here," she shouted, her voice cutting through the shadows. "I am with him. We face this together." The shadow shrieked, recoiling, but it did not vanish. Instead, it formed a barrier of black mist, closing in around them. Rurik moved beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. His grip was firm, grounding her. "Trust me," he said. "Trust the bond, trust yourself." Alara closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the ring flow through her, feeling the connection to Rurik, to their shared strength. Together, they pushed forward. The shadow tested them at every turn, conjuring fears, doubts, and illusions of despair. But every time it struck, they faced it together, their hands brushing, their hearts in sync. Hours passed, though it felt like an eternity. Finally, they reached the heart of the mountains, a cavern carved with ancient runes and glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. The curse surged one last time, manifesting as a colossal figure, taller than Rurik, darker than the night itself. "You cannot defy me," it hissed. "You are bound by fate, yet I am older, stronger, and eternal." Rurik stepped forward, placing himself between the shadow and Alara. "We are stronger together," he said. "We are not afraid." Alara took a deep breath, raising her hand with the glowing ring. A warmth spread from her finger through her arm, then through her entire body. She felt the courage, the trust, and the bond surge within her. "You will not harm us," she said, her voice steady. "We choose each other, no matter what you show us." The shadow roared, lashing out with darkness, but the glow of the ring flared brighter, surrounding them both with light. The bond, the courage, and the trust they shared formed a shield, pushing the shadow back. For a long, tense moment, nothing moved but the wind and the faint glow of the runes. Then, slowly, the shadow shrank, dissolving into mist that drifted harmlessly into the cavern walls. The curse had been broken, not by brute force alone, but by their unity, their courage, and their willingness to trust one another completely. Alara sank to her knees, exhausted but alive. Rurik knelt beside her, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. His eyes were softer now, filled with awe and relief. You did it, he said quietly. We did it together. Alara smiled, a mixture of relief and pride. Together, she repeated, letting herself lean into him slightly. She realized then that she had never felt safer, never felt more alive. Not just because of his strength, but because of the bond they shared, the invisible thread that had carried them through danger, fear, and the test of the curse. Rurik reached out, taking her hand, their fingers intertwining. Alara, he said, his voice low and reverent, you are mine, not by force, not by obligation, but because of choice, and I am yours. Her heart leapt at his words. The bond had chosen them, but now they chose each other freely. The warmth of the ring pulsed on her finger, echoing the truth in her chest. She smiled, brushing her hand against his cheek. Then we face everything together, always. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The wind in the mountains, the faint light of the runes, the quiet hum of magic in the air, they existed only for the two of them. The curse was gone, the trial passed, but the bond remained, stronger than ever. And in that moment, Alara understood something she had never realized before. Courage was not just about facing enemies or danger. Courage was about opening your heart, trusting someone completely, and letting yourself be vulnerable. She had saved a giant warrior from death, but in doing so she had discovered her own strength and a love she had never expected. Rurik leaned closer, his forehead brushing against hers. You are remarkable, he whispered, and I will protect you as you protected me. Alara closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his presence, the steady beat of his heart, and the glow of the ring connecting them. And I will stand by you, she whispered back, through everything, always. The mountains around them were silent now, peaceful after the storm of the curse. Yet the bond between them hummed, alive with possibility. They had faced darkness, danger, and fear, and emerged stronger, united not only by fate but by choice, courage, and trust. As the first light of dawn broke through the cavern entrance, Alara and Rurik stood side by side. The forest below, the fortress behind, and the mountains beyond, they were no longer separate. Their lives, their hearts, and their destinies were bound together. The ring glimmered on her finger, a quiet symbol of the journey they had endured and the life they would face together. And though the world outside would continue to challenge them, the bond they shared promised strength, hope, and a love that had been forged in fire, shadow, and courage. For the first time, Alara understood the truth of Rurik's words. They were stronger together. And the story that had begun with a single arrow, a single act of courage, had grown into a destiny neither of them could have imagined, but both of them would embrace.